So have you heard about this trend where women are like abstaining from intimacy?
Yeah, definitely. It's been making the rounds.
Yeah, it's unless a man commits, and some are even shaving their heads.
Wow.
Like as a symbol of their commitment.
It's interesting, right? It seems to have some loose connection to that 4B movement in South Korea.
Right.
Yeah. No dating, no marriage, no sex, no childbirth.
Yeah.
This new trend is it's sparking a lot of conversation, that's for sure.
Yeah, and not everyone's on board.
Not at all.
Even among women. And that's what makes it so interesting for us to do a deep dive on this.
Absolutely.
We have some articles, we have some forum discussions about this trend, and we really want to unpack it.
Yeah.
Like what is the motivation behind this, and maybe even explore some potential consequences. One of the things that really jumped out at me was the observation that a lot of women drawn to this trend are, maybe those who already have some challenges forming long-term relationships. It seems kind of counterintuitive.
It does seem a little, paradoxical, at least on the surface.
Yeah.
I mean, from a sociological perspective, this could be, some kind of manifestation of frustration with how dating is,
Right.
Maybe they feel like the traditional ways of finding a partner aren't working.
Yeah.
So they're trying something, more radical.
Right.
It makes you think about agency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are they consciously trying to change the dating landscape, or is it more subconscious?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because on the one hand, it's like they're taking control, setting boundaries, demanding respect.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it could be seen as kind of a self-limiting choice.
It's true.
And then our sources also highlight that some women, they see this as beneficial.
Oh, interesting.
Like almost like it's eliminating competition.
Like, hey, thanks for opting out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where evolutionary psychology might be helpful.
Okay.
The whole mate selection, competition thing.
Right.
Deeply rooted in our biology. Of course, modern relationships are way more nuanced, but it's possible that some women see this as a way to be more attractive.
Within a certain segment.
Exactly.
Yeah. This whole thing reminds me of that man versus bear trend.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That was all over the internet for a while.
Everyone was like terrified of bears.
Right. And then someone pointed out the statistics. And you realize it's not really, the fear is not really.
It's proportional to the actual danger.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And then it just disappeared.
Yeah.
Do you think this could be similar?
It's possible, yeah. Social media can really amplify things.
Oh, sure.
Especially stuff that gets people emotional. And a lot of times people don't really think things through. They just jump on the bandwagon. So yeah, it could fizzle out just as quickly.
So what about men's reactions to this whole thing? What does the source material say about that?
Well, it seems like most men see it as, a bit misguided.
Okay.
Maybe even immature.
Yeah.
But there's also a sense of empathy.
Oh, interesting.
It's not just like, oh, those silly women, There's a genuine attempt to understand, which I think speaks to the bigger issue of, how men and women communicate.
Right.
Especially when it comes to relationships.
Right, and how those are changing.
Exactly. Everyone wants to understand each other.
Yeah.
But it can be hard to, find the right way to do that.
Totally. And here's where it gets even more complicated.
Yeah.
Because according to our sources, a lot of the women who are advocating for this celibacy, they're not actually abstaining.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They're citing dating app data.
So it's not quite what it seems.
It's a real head scratcher.
Yeah. It makes you think about, this idea of performative activism.
Right.
Especially online. People want to look good, project a certain image.
Yeah.
So the question is, are they really committed to this? Or is it just for show?
Yeah, it's like they're waving this celibacy flag.
Right.
But then behind the scenes,
it's business as usual.
Yeah, exactly. Our source even told a story about how some men are now seeing shaved heads as a sign to avoid certain women.
Wow. Like a warning sign.
Yeah, talk about unintended consequences.
That's a perfect example of how our actions can send the wrong message.
Right.
There's a whole field of study about this. It's called signaling theory.
Oh,
It looks at how we interpret cues in social situations, and in this case, the signal is backfiring.
Yeah, it's creating barriers instead of, bringing people together.
Exactly.
One thing our source pointed out was this idea that men tend to be more logical when it comes to these sorts of debates, and women are more driven by emotion.
Mm-hmm.
He even said it's like a fundamental difference.
Well, research does suggest that there are differences in how men and women communicate.
Okay.
And how they process emotions. But we have to be careful about generalizing.
Right.
Everyone's different. You can't just put people in boxes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking of navigating tricky topics, our source also mentioned that he's really cautious about political discussions these days.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Especially with all the misinformation and media bias.
It's everywhere.
He even brought up that clip of former President Trump.
The fine people on both sides thing?
Yeah. Apparently the full context is different from what was widely circulated.
It just shows how important critical thinking is.
Right.
And media literacy. We're bombarded with information all the time.
Yeah.
We have to be careful about what we believe.
Absolutely. In fact, our source actually had to change some of his own views. Yeah, after he did some research, he had to challenge his own assumptions.
It can be hard to do that.
It is. But it's about finding the truth.
For sure.
Not just sticking to what you already believe.
Sounds like your source had a really valuable experience. That's what it's all about, being open to learning new things.
Absolutely. And speaking of journeys, our source said his time in the military really shaped his worldview.
Oh, interesting. How so?
He learned that things are rarely black and white.
Makes sense.
There are always shades of gray.
Yeah.
Real life situations are complicated. You can't always categorize things easily.
The military definitely exposes you to a lot of different perspectives. It makes you think about things in a new way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really does. And it brings us back to this whole celibacy thing. Is it really empowering?
Right.
Or is it, maybe accidentally self-sabotaging?
Yeah, it's a question I keep coming back to. On the one hand, I totally get it, setting boundaries, taking control, especially in dating, which can be so confusing.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it feels really unfair.
Totally.
But then I wonder about, are there consequences they aren't thinking about?
Yeah, and especially when what they're saying doesn't match up with what they're actually doing.
Exactly.
And if we dig a little deeper, I think we'll find a lot of different reasons why women are doing this. Some might really want to change their lives,
Right.
Like they're done with shallow connections. They want something more.
Yeah.
But for others, it might be more about making a statement, or they're frustrated and this is how they're expressing it. Or maybe they just want attention. Who knows?
It makes me think about social media and how it affects us.
Oh, absolutely.
We're constantly told how to look, how to act, how to feel.
It's hard to escape.
It is.
And it's easy to get caught up in that and try to project some perfect image.
Right, even if it's not really you.
Exactly. And that's where we get back to this performative activism thing.
Right.
Social media makes it so easy to show off your good deeds, even if you're not really living that way.
Yeah.
So you have to wonder, are these online movements actually changing anything?
It's a good question. Are we really talking about these issues honestly?
Yeah.
Or is it all just for show?
And I think the fact that even women are divided on this celibacy thing,
right,
it shows just how tough these conversations are.
It really does.
And it reminds us to be, understanding and empathetic when we talk about this stuff. It's not about picking sides or judging anyone.
Right.
It's about recognizing that people are complicated. And there's not one right answer for everyone.
I agree.
And it's important to remember that, not every woman who's into this trend is doing it for the same reason.
Right.
Some genuinely feel stronger by setting boundaries and putting their own needs first. Others might be dealing with past pain.
Right.
Or they're just fed up with dating.
It's about seeing the individual.
Exactly. You can't generalize. Everyone has their own story.
Our source also talked about how the media influences these conversations. The same event can be presented in totally different ways.
Oh, for sure.
Depending on who's reporting it.
Totally.
He even brought up that Trump clip again as an example.
Oh, right, with the editing and everything.
Yeah, it shows how media bias can really twist things.
Yeah, it's scary how easily they can manipulate what we see and hear.
And it makes you realize, we have to be really careful about what we believe.
Absolutely. We have to check the sources, look for bias, and do our own research.
It can be overwhelming, though.
Oh, totally.
with so much information coming at us.
Yeah, that's why media literacy is so important.
Right.
We have to be able to filter through all that noise and figure out what's real.
So it's about developing those skills, the critical thinking.
Exactly. Questioning everything.
Yeah.
And understanding how information is, put together and spread around.
Okay, so if we wanted to boil this all down for our listeners, what are the key takeaways?
I think the biggest one is to remember that people are complex.
Right.
There's always more going on than meets the eye. So be curious. Try to understand where other people are coming from.
That's a great one. What else?
Media literacy, for sure.
Okay.
We can't just believe everything we read or see.
We need to be skeptical.
Absolutely. Always question the source. Look for different viewpoints.
The critical thinking is key.
Exactly. And I think the last thing is to remember we're all in this together.
Yeah.
We're all learning. We're all trying to figure things out.
Right.
It's okay to disagree, but let's do it respectfully.
And try to find common ground.
Exactly.
So bringing it back to this celibacy trend, is it empowering or is it self-sabotaging?
That's the thing about this deep dive, right?
Yeah.
We're not giving answers. We're exploring the questions, the nuances, the contradictions.
Yeah.
We've looked at why women might be doing this, what could happen, and how it fits into society. Now it's up to each listener to decide what they think.
I like that, empowering our audience to form their own opinions.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up, what's our final thought for everyone?
How about this? Regardless of why it's happening or what the outcome is, what does this celibacy trend say about men and women today?
Okay.
Is it a symptom of something bigger? A demand for change? Or just a fad that will disappear?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
It's something to think about.
Definitely.
And on that note, we'll let our listeners continue the conversation. Tell us what you think.
Yeah.
Share your thoughts and experiences on social media. We want to hear from you. It really makes you think, like when you dig into something like this.
It does, yeah.
And you start to see all these different layers.
And it shows how connected everything really is. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Like we started with this dating trend, but we've talked about what psychology and media and even like what is truth.
It's all related, yeah.
Our source said something that really stuck with me, this idea that life isn't black and white. He said being in the military taught him to see the shades of gray.
I can see that.
And it made me think of, cognitive dissonance.
Right, where you have these conflicting ideas.
Yeah, and it's like your brain doesn't want to accept both.
It can be uncomfortable.
It can be.
And it makes us want to, simplify things.
Right, put them in neat little boxes.
Like, this is good, this is bad.
Yeah, but life's not like that.
It's messy, full of contradictions.
And maybe that's okay.
Maybe that's where the freedom is.
It's like we're all trying to solve this giant puzzle, but we're using the wrong pieces.
Or trying to force them to fit.
Exactly.
And that's how you get stuck.
It is.
And frustrated, and then people start fighting.
Right.
But if we just accept that there are different ways of looking at things, even on issues that seem simple, it makes things a lot easier.
Totally. Even when our source was talking about all this serious stuff, he still found a way to make light of it.
He seems to have a good sense of humor.
He does. He said he tries not to, quote, pick on people who disagree with him.
Okay.
Because he said it's like picking on a 5-year-old.
I like that. It's a good perspective.
It is. Sometimes you need to just laugh,
Humor can be a lifesaver.
Especially when things get heavy.
Yeah, it helps you keep things in perspective.
Right. Remember, we're all in this together.
We're all just figuring things out as we go.
Yeah, it's like we're all stumbling around in the dark.
Trying to find the light switch.
Exactly. And instead of getting mad at each other,
we can laugh about it.
Yeah, find the humor in it all.
Because in the end, we're all human.
We are.
And maybe by laughing together, we can start to break down those walls that divide us.
And find that common ground.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing we want our listeners to take away from all this?
I'd say don't be afraid of complexity.
Okay.
Challenge yourself to see things from different angles.
Be open to new ideas.
Exactly. Never stop learning.
And never lose your sense of humor.
Exactly.
Well said.
Thanks for having me.
This was great. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.